Hey everybody, welcome back to the penultimate episode of this series about political parties and interest groups. So let's get right to business. Okay, so this episode is all about two key linkage institutions, political parties and interest groups. So without any further ado, let's start by defining linkage institutions. Actually, if you want to hit that like button real quick before you forget, that'd be awesome. Okay, so here's an obnoxiously formal definition. Linkage institutions are channels that allow people to communicate their preferences to policymakers. In other words, they connect people to the government. And we're going to talk about four main linkage institutions: political parties, interest groups, and in the next episode, elections and the news media. So let's start with political parties. The primary goal of a political party is to gain power and win elections. I know that might sound a little jaded, but for the two main parties, it's absolutely true. While they certainly want to influence public policy, they can only do that if they win. The loser doesn't get to do anything, so you have to win first. Let's consider some functions of parties and how they attempt to achieve their goal and help their candidates win elections. Parties mobilize and educate voters. Mobilization can refer to their GOTV or get out the vote efforts to help physically get their supporters to the polls to vote, and the party attempts to win over voters by providing information to support their candidates and causes. Similarly, parties establish a platform, which is basically a statement of their policies and goals for the next 4 years. It highlights a wide range of political issues and says, here's our position as Democrats or as Republicans, and here's our stand on that issue. Additionally, parties recruit candidates for public office. They also help to manage campaigns, they raise money for candidates from their party, and they facilitate media strategy to try to benefit the party as a whole. Again, as always, these efforts come back to trying to support their goal of winning elections. Political parties also have tremendous influence in Congress through both the committee and party leadership systems. When it comes to committees, committee assignments are largely made by the party, and the chairman of each committee is determined by majority party status. Similarly, leadership positions such as the Speaker of the House or Majority Leader are positions that belong to a member of the majority party. Next, we want to consider how political parties change and adapt. Now, recently, one change parties have been facing is the rise of candidate-centered politics. Some voters focus more on the individual candidate than his or her party affiliation. This is significant because it means that voters might support a candidate even if a party doesn't choose them, or sometimes even if party leadership outright opposes them. Donald Trump and Bernie Sanders, among others, are both excellent examples of this trend. Neither had the endorsement or support of their party leadership in 2016, and yet both have an army of loyal supporters who would likely continue supporting them even if their party leadership turned against them. Critical elections are elections in which some major issue bubbles up and leads to new voter coalitions and to a new majority party for an extended time. Critical elections are pretty rare, the most recent ones being 1932 and perhaps 1968. They may precede a party realignment or a dramatic, long-lasting shift of party affiliation. In other words, a lot of people changing parties for a long time. More recently, the US has experienced a regional realignment in which the South, which had been strongly Democratic for about 130 years, has shifted towards the Republican Party and is now solidly Republican. In addition to these changes, other forces have contributed to the weakening of political parties. One of these is the rise of the primary system. We'll talk more about primaries in the next video, but for now, we can just point out the fact that because citizens now have the chance to vote for and help choose their party's candidates, this reduces the influence of party leaders. Similarly, we'll talk about changes in campaign finance laws in the next episode, but the result of these changes has been that it is much easier for candidates to raise money themselves, and so they are much less reliant on party leadership for funds than they used to be. So Bernie Sanders, for example, doesn't need to worry about keeping Democratic Party leadership happy because he's able to come to us once again and ask for your money. And in this era of big tech and big data, it shouldn't be surprising that political parties attempt to use these resources to target their political messaging and try to use sophisticated techniques to help inspire and mobilize voters. Now, this is the time in the episode where I remind you that there are other parties besides Democrats and Republicans. We kind of dismissively refer to them all as third parties. So the Constitution doesn't overtly establish a two-party system. In fact, parties aren't even mentioned at all. But there are structural barriers, meaning the way that elections are conducted in this country, that act as barriers for third-party success. In fact, there's a bunch of them, as you can see on the screen, but we're really only going to focus on two of these in this video: the winner-take-all system and the incorporation of third-party agendas. The US has winner-take-all voting districts. People in all 435 districts hold an election every even-numbered year, and the winner of the election in that district goes to the House to serve as their representative. The loser gets nothing. Good day, sir. Sorry, got carried away. That sounds so normal to us. So, how is this a barrier to third parties? Well, consider an alternative: a proportional representation system. Now, under this fictional arrangement, there would be a single nationwide election, and people would vote, and then the seats in the House would be apportioned based on the proportion of the vote that each party won. Let's say that a third party, we'll call it the Lamani Party, they won 13% of the vote nationwide. Pretty impressive for a third party, if I do say so myself. Now, in a proportional system, the Lamani Party would then get 13% of the seats in the House of Representatives. Not bad. Certainly enough to be very influential determining the passage of legislation in Congress. However, in the winner-take-all system that the United States has, the Lamani Party would probably send 0 members to the House of Representatives. Not the same reward at all. Another barrier for third parties is that when they successfully build support for a particular policy, one of the two major parties usually swoops in and takes that issue and includes it in their platform. And once that happens, it takes away a reason that people may have had to vote for that third party, since now one of the big eyes that can actually win supports that policy. So life can be rough for third parties. In addition, they face informal barriers, like voters thinking that voting for third parties is a waste of their vote. An alternative way that people can attempt to influence policy is via interest groups. The purpose of an interest group is to influence public policy, often for a very specific purpose. So, whereas a political party has a platform and takes a position on basically every political issue, interest groups usually have a very narrow purpose, laser focused on specific policy goals. It might be to support pro-life policies, or to oppose the death penalty, or to advocate for animal rights, or for one of about 10 million other things. So, what do they do to try and accomplish their goal of influencing policy? Well, some tactics are very similar to political parties. Interest groups attempt to educate voters and office holders. Remember that these groups have a policy objective, so this isn't unbiased, neutral information they're providing people. Interest groups hire lobbyists who are considered experts in their particular area, and so they often work with policymakers who are ideologically aligned with the group. They sometimes testify at congressional committee hearings when proposed legislation is being discussed and debated. Additionally, lobbyists are sometimes able to meet with members of congressional committees and assist with the drafting of legislation, even proposing changes to the bill and ways to word the bill that they would support. I mean, think about that for a minute. They are sometimes literally in the room where it happens. That's the kind of influence some interest groups have on the policymaking process. Let's talk about lobbying more generally. Interest groups hire lobbyists to persuade political leaders to support the group's positions and policy goals. Lobbyists can put pressure on congressmen to vote the way they want by threatening to withdraw campaign funding. Between this pressure and the information they provide policymakers, lobbyists can often be very influential. Additionally, they can mobilize their membership if a policymaker isn't responding to nicer methods. They can basically unleash their membership and have them put pressure on policymakers through social media, phone calls, and town hall meetings. And interest groups don't only focus on legislators. They also influence bureaucratic agencies as part of iron triangles and issue networks. Remember that bureaucratic agencies make rules and regulations, so interest groups sometimes focus their efforts on the agency's decision makers through this relationship. This graphic shows how each part benefits from this relationship. Interest groups receive legislation and regulations they favor while giving electoral support to congressmen, who in turn provide funding and political support to the agency. There are a couple of potential issues with interest groups to bring up. One is the inequality of political and economic resources. Some interest groups have larger memberships or are very well funded, and this clearly gives them an advantage over smaller, less well funded groups. And this contributes directly to the second issue: unequal access to decision makers. Those well funded groups, or those with large memberships, typically have much more access to policymakers. Not all interest groups are in the room where it happens. So, this is one of the reasons there can be debate about whether interest groups possibly embody elite democracy more than pluralist democracy. Oh, I should also point out the free rider problem that some interest groups encounter when people who aren't members benefit from the group's efforts. This is a problem because they may lack the incentive to join the group and financially support it, which can hinder the group in accomplishing its goals. And lastly, there are other ways that citizens come together to influence policy and demand change. One way is through social movements, which are broad based efforts to achieve major policy change. These are often grassroots movements where a large number of people rise up to demand change to a specific problem they perceive. These can sometimes succeed in achieving policy success, but at the same time may lack leadership, resources, infrastructure, and clear policy objectives, which can hinder their success. Alright, I'm so glad you stuck with me all the way to the end of this episode. I know there was a ton of information in this video, but great job making it all the way to the end. Be sure to pause the video so you can answer the multiple choice questions and see how well you know political parties and interest groups. Put your answers in the comments below and check your answers in the answer key in the description. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you soon in the series finale on elections and the news media. Until next time, this has been a LaMoney production. Thanks again for watching this video. Hit that like button if this video helped. Subscribe if you haven't already. Ring the bell. You guys know the routine. You've been watching these videos. And if you haven't already, make sure to check out the AP Gov Ultimate Review Packet. It is not too late. It'll help you on the AP exam. It'll help you in your class. Help you with everything you need to prepare for this AP exam. So check it out, and I'll see you guys in the finale.